Good morning, bonjour, kwe everyone. So, the day 3 of this AGA, 45th AGA, AFN AGA, and we already, as you can see, we already have our first guest of the day. So, Monsieur Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, Monsieur Pierre Poilievre, le chef du Parti conservateur du Canada, qui est avec nous. And on that, just to explain you quickly, he's with us for a period of 30 minutes. So 30 minutes, as you all know, has been set aside on the agenda for that, and I'll be managing the time. We'll have time for some questions and answers. As you all know by now, it's not because you're up in line at the microphones that we'll have time to get to you, but we'll do everything possible to hear the most of you, and we'll take 3 chiefs first at once, and then we'll go back to Mr. Pierre Poilievre. So on that, I am going to invite him to come to the podium to address the Assembly. Thank you, everyone. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, tout le monde. Je suis honoré d'avoir l'occasion de me joindre à vous ici à l'occasion du 45e Assemblée générale annuelle de l'AFN sur la terre traditionnelle de la nation Kanien'kehá:ka. It's an honor to be here for the 45th Annual General Assembly of the AFN on the traditional territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka. And I'd like to thank your National Chief, Woodhouse, and members of the AFN, Chief in Assembly, youth, veterans, and those elders who have guided and prayed for a good assembly. Thank you in particular, National Chief, for inviting me here today, but also for taking the time to pray with myself and, more importantly, my wife Anna, and to remind both of us that there is a creator of all things who imparts wisdom and guidance that we should seek every single day. Wisdom also comes from those who came before us, and that, of course, includes our first peoples who have been here since time immemorial. I want to thank and honor you for bringing thousands and thousands of years of ancestral history to this Assembly. From this history flows the treaties and Section 35 constitutional rights which recognize and affirm your rights and relationship with the Crown of Canada. As I was flying into Montreal, I looked down at the ground beneath, and I thought, it's easy to understand why you've chosen to gather in this particular spot. For thousands of years, when the rivers were the highways of this land, this was a place for people to meet and exchange goods and ideas. Just south of us, on the shores near Verdun, archaeologists have found artifacts going back 5,000 years, including copper that likely originated at Lake Superior, evidence of highly sophisticated trade networks that existed here and right across North America, supported by agreements between nations that facilitated a free enterprise that is as impressive as what we see today. This is my first meeting with you in person, but I hope it will be the first of many. I want the next generation of Canada and the next government that I hope to have the privilege to lead to build a genuine partnership with First Nations, a nation-to-nation relationship based on the recognition of rights and mutual respect. It may surprise some of you to learn that the values and institutions of your pre-colonial history that I described moments ago are shared by Conservatives. Values of faith and spirituality, values of acknowledging a higher creator, values of family as the greatest social safety net we have, values of tradition, the traditions, stories, and knowledge that are the foundation of any people, that form a long chain that connects one generation to the next, those that were, those that are, and those that will be, and makes each person understand that he is a part of something bigger than himself. Values of entrepreneurship, the kind of inventiveness and determination that allowed First Peoples to survive in this unforgiving land for millennia without today's comforts. Values of the land, an attachment to a place, and a duty to harvest its bounty while passing it on pristine to those that follow. These Indigenous values, faith, family, work, tradition, entrepreneurship, and land, will guide everything I do as Prime Minister. But let me be clear, I'm not here to run your life. I don't want to run anybody's life. I want to run a small government with big citizens, free to make their own decisions and live their own lives. This is especially true for First Nations peoples. Every one of you in this room is a leader. Every one of you knows your communities better than Ottawa does, and certainly better than I do. You draw on thousands of years of experience, while Canada has only been here for a century and a half. That's why we will get the government gatekeepers, the federal government gatekeepers, out of your way so you can do what's best for your members. My promise to all Canadians is that a common-sense Conservative government will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. This is my general commitment, but it is of particular importance to First Peoples. Axe the tax means cancelling a carbon tax that is making food and groceries more unaffordable for everyone, but especially for First Nations people. Because of the remote and colder weather that you must confront, this tax is particularly cruel and unjust, and that is why I support the Chiefs of Ontario and their judicial review to counter this unjust tax burden. But I have good news. When I am Prime Minister, the Chiefs of Ontario will not have to spend any more money on lawyers because I will axe the tax, and when I say it, I mean it. Build the homes. We need to make it easier for you to provide your housing for your people. I know that the demand for housing among your members has grown faster than supply because the federal government has consistently failed your communities by raising the cost of construction with layers of bureaucracy and pricing you out of the housing market on your own land. Common-sense Conservatives will work to cut red tape in Ottawa and create new financing and mortgage options that make buying, building, and renovating homes more affordable. Stop the crime. We need to stop the crime everywhere, but we also need to acknowledge that there has been a particular problem with crime in rural and remote communities since 2015. And part of this is that the federal government has not provided adequate or competent policing. We need to fix that by cooperating with First Nations leaders and looking at new models that allow you to chart your own course on policing if you so choose, and I've been happy to discuss these matters with your National Chief. We need to cut off the flow of illicit drugs and gang activities that threaten communities. We also need to stop Justin Trudeau's wacko policies of legalizing drugs and leaving addicts at the mercy of predatory drug dealers. It means turning hurt into hope by building recovery centres, using traditional Indigenous knowledge and healing traditions to give addicts the help they need to break the cycle of drug use and heal their bodies and minds. I've also discussed with the National Chief ways that we can improve policing by removing bureaucracy and giving more autonomy to local communities who want it. And fix the budget. It means cutting waste in Ottawa and putting power back in the hands of local leaders and the common people of Canada. There's so much untapped potential in this country. So much of that potential resides in your nations and communities. For too long, you've been held back by a broken system that takes power away from you and places it in the hands of politicians and bureaucrats in Ottawa. That's why I'm committed to ending the Ottawa knows best paternalistic system. As you know, the Indian Act puts reserved land and money in the hands of the federal government, which means you often have to go to Ottawa to ask for tax revenues collected from resource development on your very own lands. No other government has to do that. The result is that money is wasted on paperwork, and there's less left over for the good projects that you seek to advance in your own communities. My goal is to reduce the bureaucracy and simplify the funding for your nations. One way to do that could be by converting more of the project-by-project grants into predictable funding streams that you can count on and borrow against for major capital projects without endlessly filling out forms or waiting for answers from Ottawa. That is also why common sense Conservatives support the First Nations resource charge that will allow you to take back control of your resource money that is rightfully yours. This is a first. Thank you. Although I don't deserve the applause, this was a First Nations developed idea. I simply came along and accepted it, put it in my platform. You all did the hard work of developing this idea. I'm simply here to follow your marching orders and make it happen. It's a completely optional model that will simplify negotiations between resource companies and First Nations, so that you don't have to waste years on endless negotiations reinventing the wheel every time there's a new project. It will be a very simple to administer program. Here's how it works. First Nations can collect taxes from resource companies, and those companies will get a 50% refundable tax credit from the federal government that will vacate the space and make it economically viable for them to do so. This new approach will mean the money goes directly to you rather than from the community to the federal government and then all the way back. It would not actually stop you from also signing impact benefit agreements or making other arrangements that are already available to you. The choice would be yours and the option would be on the table. It would put you back in charge of your money. It will mean less waste in Ottawa and more money for your communities. And that money will mean powerful paychecks, services, training, clean drinking water, and economic opportunity. I've made no secret about my desire to see more economic growth and development. I talk about it everywhere. It will give people better jobs, more opportunities, and powerful paychecks, and all that depends on economic growth. That means listening to you when you have concerns about projects, yes, but it also means listening to you when you support development, and especially when your members and your leaders and are partners in those projects. If reconciliation means anything, it means saying yes to economic opportunities that First Nations are asking for. Yet this federal government has repeatedly shut down projects that have the support of strong majorities of local First Nations, almost never with proper consultation beforehand. That is unacceptable. When your future is at stake, your right to say yes is as important as your right to say no. And when you think about it, I believe in Section 35 consultation rights. I believe those rights require our government consult with people who want projects to go ahead as well as those who do not want them to go ahead. When this government killed the Tech Frontier Mine, a $20 billion project, it didn't consult with all the surrounding First Nations that supported the project, nor has it properly consulted with the many First Nations in Northern Ontario that want the Ring of Fire, but can't get it because we have a wacko environment minister who doesn't want to grant a permit to build a road to get there. You know, we need to get the federal government to consult with you on your opinion, even when that opinion is yes. And this is important because we've seen the successes that can happen when we say yes. The LNG Canada project, a $40 billion project, initiated by former Haisla Chief Councillor Ellis Ross. This is the single biggest construction project in Canadian history, and I'm very proud that Ellis Ross will be a candidate for the Common Sense Conservatives and a Member of Parliament after the next election. The Haisla Nation is also pushing ahead with a $3.28 billion Cedar LNG project. The Inuk Cree is building under the leadership of then-Chief Billy Morin, who's also a Common Sense Conservative candidate running in the next election, is building the first surgical centre on reserve in Canada, which will provide revenue for his people and care for all Albertans. The Mi'kmaq First Nations have shown that First Nations traditional knowledge can be used in food and the production of nutritious foods by purchasing Clearwater seafoods in Nova Scotia. And my personal favorite, the Squamish in BC are building 6,000 housing units on 10 acres of land. Now this is right inside Vancouver. It never would have happened, by the way, if the decision was left to Vancouver City Hall, because their gatekeepers would have dragged it out forever and blocked it from happening. We're seeing more and more First Nations communities are more open for business, more progressive in getting things done than their neighbouring municipalities. I spoke to an investor here in Montreal who said he planned to invest in the city of Calgary, but all the bureaucracy and the cobweb of confusion at City Hall there blocked him. So he went next door to Susina, and he said it was the best place to do business he's ever been, and so he's investing his millions there. This is a real opportunity. The incompetence and obstructiveness of municipal governments will provide a competitive advantage to those First Nations communities who open the door to business and create opportunity for their people, and I can't wait to facilitate that with you. Those are just a few examples of First Nations entrepreneurship and initiative, but there are countless others that we need to pursue. The reality is we don't have billions. We have trillions of dollars of resource wealth right beneath our feet. That wealth belongs in many cases to you and your communities. Your children can be the richest in the world if we unleash these opportunities. And that's why we will be laser focused on economic growth and opportunity for First Nations. But I also know that there's more to reconciliation than that. For many decades, your cultures, your languages, and your way of life have been silenced and sidelined by the federal government. Just a couple of years ago, the federal government tried to pass a law banning hunting rifles. This would have effectively criminalized the traditional way of life of your communities. Common sense Conservatives thank the AFN for standing up and defending the rights of your people and all people to own hunting rifles and harvest the land responsibly. And we will continue to do that. Protecting and preserving history, culture, and tradition are the bedrock of Conservative values. Common sense Conservatives will support you and your knowledge keepers to keep customs, traditions, and history alive, to pass your stories on to your children and grandchildren, and to better educate all Canadians. The story of Indigenous people in this land from time immemorial is one of strength and resilience, and it includes your great contributions to building and defending the country that we share today. Indigenous soldiers have served with distinction in every war in which Canadians have fought, from 1812 to First World War, Second World War, Korea, and most recently Afghanistan. At Queenston Heights, 300 Mohawk warriors under the leadership of Chiefs John Norton and John Brant led an early assault that broke the spirits of the American invaders. At Vimy Ridge, Indigenous marksmen and infantrymen helped Canada win the victory that defined us as a country in the eyes of the world. This history is rightly a source of pride for your members, and it should be known by all Canadians. I don't believe in cancelling or denying history, but I do believe in telling the whole story. For me, that means adding more names and more stories and more voices to our national narrative. Canadian school children should know about the pain, but also the pride of the First Nations people. Figures like Thanel Delther, Chief Poundmaker, Chief Crowfoot, Catherine Sutton, Joseph Brant, Tommy Prince, Mary 2 Acts Early should be as familiar as the European names that used to exclusively fill our textbook. The heroism of First Nations should be known by all. Turning from the past to the future, Common Sense Conservatives will partner with you as you write new stories for your people, new stories of growth and prosperity, of dignity and self-determination, of healing and revival. This means that education resources and facilities have to match the high ambition of your children, especially in northern and remote communities that have been deprived of resources and opportunities for too long. The federal government can help with this, but it can't do it alone. So I issue a challenge to the CEOs in the towers around this building to train Indigenous youth and give them the opportunities. Before these CEOs think to fly in foreign workers to fill job opportunities, they should first and foremost be offering those jobs to Indigenous youth. Thank you. I know that the relationship between First Nations and the federal government has been painful and destructive because of the federal government's terrible decisions. For decades, the residential school system removed children from the love and care of their families. It was a monstrous abuse of excessive governmental power that cut your children off from their cultures, languages, and traditions. In many cases, students were neglected and abused. Tragically, too many young children never came home. Those were terrible crimes by a big and imposing government against each victim and against your communities. In 2008, the federal government, under then Prime Minister Harper, issued an apology and launched the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But there is more work to be done. I know that Canada has no future without a strong future for the First Nations people. As Justice Lamar of the Supreme Court said in the Dalgamuk case, we are all here to stay. All of our futures are intertwined, like the small rivers that flow into the St. Lawrence to make a great highway of prosperity. What each of us brings to the table will combine to bring the success of all of us. I am here, Prime Minister, in its proper meaning. It means first servant. That is my job, to be a servant of all the people and to be a partner to the First Nations. I know that it won't be easy. We won't always agree. And you've heard enough promises and enough performative reconciliation. Well, we need our honest and direct conversations and a partnership based on a nation-to-nation relationship and mutual respect. I come here to offer that respect in total humility and thank you for your immense contributions as we move forward together with your values and to unleash the potential of all Canadians. Thank you very much. Would you like me to sit down?
Merci, Monsieur le chef du Parti conservateur du Canada, Monsieur Pierre Poilievre, pour vos mots adressés à l'Assemblée. On that, we have 10 minutes in front of us for this Q&A session. And as agreed with Mr. Poilievre, we will take one chief at a time, so one person at the microphone, and we'll go back to Mr. Poilievre. So once again, it's not a guarantee that we will get to you with the time allowed and the time we have. And I will suggest to be concise and brief. That way, we will be in a position to hear the most of you. So, on that, microphone number 1, please. If you can please state your name and nation. Over to you.
Ani, good morning. Rachel Mendo Bindishnikas, Wikwem Kong Benjaba, Gimakwe Odindao, Makwadodem, Andan Matkwe Digo. Migwech in the Gabajain. Ni Quikwedgman. Mondani, Gekagam Gong, Odewikwem Kong, Ni. Danini. Minjandama, Tsabondashni, Mandani, Council Ishnikazat, Gigdonani no Kmino Gigdo Quelk, Gichinakita Manda, Ni the Shmabak Chigama, Migwetago Ka Ekadat, Minoshni, Bedadze Mandani King, Wijnad Mad going, Nidish do Quedman Nungwa. Anish Gegi Nindaman, we wape Kamagat Manda, we bani Manda ni Gekagam Gong, Jim Minjandmang, Minochni, we Jibitemagak. So, hello, good morning. My name is Rachel Manitowabi. I'm from Wikwemkong unceded territory. I'm of the Bear Clan, and my spirit name is Woman Who Brings Change. Thank you for being here today, Mr. Poilievre. I had a great meeting yesterday with MP Jamie Schmale, and my question and my issue is this. Over the past 3 years, my council and I have been working fiercely to try to build an elders' home in our community. We've been working tirelessly with ISC, Indigenous Services Canada. and it's a much-needed elders building. To date, the only holdout has been the federal government. And since we first initiated the project, the costs for this project have skyrocketed. And this is the case with many of our projects. How would you, as a government, speed up the approval process for these types of much-needed infrastructure projects on reserve?
Thank you very much for that question, and thank you for acknowledging Shadow Minister of Indigenous Relations, Jamie Schmale, who's doing an excellent job. One, we need the bureaucracy in Ottawa to be much more responsive and to give faster decisions. But I think the systematic change we need is to move towards more predictable funding flows so that you don't have to apply for every single project. You have a project, you've set a budget, your band council or leadership should be able to have a predictable flow of funding from the federal government that can be monetized, that you can borrow against, and then you can use to finance projects like this without having to apply for every single project along the way. When I travel the country and meet with Indigenous leaders, they tell me they've got an application in for this and an application in for that, and they're waiting. Why can't we bundle these things up in a transfer that predictably goes to your community and that you can budget decisions like this without having to ask Ottawa in the first place? That to me seems to be the best way to do it. Then we would have fewer bureaucrats in Ottawa, and that would unleash even more money that we could leave in the communities so that you could build elder centers or water treatment plants or other infrastructure. It seems to me that we need to simplify and streamline and leave you to make your own decisions with the federal transfers being predictable, generous, and monetizable. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So we will now go to the microphone number 2, please.
Thank you. My name is Marcel Head. I'm the Chief of Shoal Lake Nation. I really enjoy listening to what you had to present here, Mr. Poilievre. But you got to realize, that Ottawa has a whole list of policies and legislations that dictates as to what we can and cannot do. You have to make changes within Parliament to make sure that bureaucracy does not stand in the way of our efforts in determining our self-determination, self-government. We talk about government to government, nation to nation discussion on self-government, but it's just not there. I told the minister yesterday, it's just not there. But we have a process that I've introduced, with your predecessor, Prime Minister Stephen Harper. I had the privilege to meet with him, and I told him, in order to right the wrongs of Canada, the injustices that have been done to us as a people of first people in Canada, I told him, you have to go back to the original, the spirit and intent of treaty, because there is a process that you need to understand. The day before treaty, the day of treaty, the day after treaty, there was a process that was missed. You see, right after the day of treaty, the treaty was taken to Ottawa, and the government of the day said, we have the land, we have access to the resources. That was wrong. That was the injustice that was done to our people. Right after that, governments of the day started legislations, policies, that removed First Nations out of the picture totally. See, when I explained to Stephen Harper, that agreement, the treaty agreement, meant to share the land, to share everything. One prospers, the other partner was to equally benefit from the resources. And we could go back to that by listening, that Ottawa needs to listen to our process. Today, I present to you a win-win situation. Right now, within that self-government, we take back what is rightfully ours, the land and the resources. We take it back, but only this time. We're not going to break our own treaty, but we are going to enhance, a process where everybody wins. Like in terms of the process, the forestry, for example, a company within our traditional territory is prepared to do business with Shoal Lake Cree Nation and Red Earth. I'm not going to name the particular company, but they're ready and prepared to do exactly what should have been done the day after treaty. So industry right now is waiting for First Nations to take back what is rightfully theirs, and that's the land and the resources. Today, if we were to discuss mutual benefit agreements, there's a three-way that profits could be split. 1/3 to Canada, 1/3 to the companies, and 1/3 to the First Nations. I think that's a win-win situation. And even the royalties, But with that, with the short time that we have, I want to invite you to Saskatchewan and provide us an audience with you. It's kind of pointless, to come here and having to have 4 minutes in the, with the speakers here. And that's disgusting. But today, I invite you to Saskatchewan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. But Chief, I agree with everything you said. This idea that Ottawa's bureaucracy and politicians can manage First Nations people is not only paternalistic and insulting, but it's proven wrong. I mean, what does the bureaucracy in Ottawa have to teach you about good management? The amount of money that's being wasted in our nation's capital. The only thing I disagree with you on is you say that it should be 1/3 for the government, 1/3 for the community. I don't think the federal government should get 1/3. I think it should get a lot less than 1/3. If the resources are developed in your land, you should get the money. The workers and the businesses that invest should get the money. We don't need the money to go to Ottawa, where it will be squandered on bureaucracy. My goal is to streamline, get the bureaucracy out of your life, have predictable funding flows so you can manage your future, and let you keep your own source revenues, including through a First Nations resource charge, so that when this forestry company does harvest timber on your land, they pay the benefits to you first, and then your community can be the first to benefit from it. I don't want to run your life. I want to run a small and competent government that stays out of your way and lets you fulfill your full potential. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to microphone number 1, please.
Judy Wilson. My traditional name is Red Hummingbird Woman. I'm from unceded territory of the Secwepemc Ulu. I just wanted to say thanks to the ancestral lands, the people here, but I also want to recognize our veterans who stood with their back to you. That should be acknowledged.
Thank you.
And our LGBTQAA+, because in your speech, you did not acknowledge missing murdered women. You did not acknowledge the United Nations. You did not acknowledge the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. You did not acknowledge the inherent title rights where my people come from. A majority of our province are inherent title and rights. It's treaty rights and constitution rights, but it's also inherent title and rights. So you failed to recognize that. You need to educate yourself on that. So the other part is that you also failed to recognize our residential school survivors, who is a real live issue. If you're working to be the next Prime Minister in Canada, it tells me you have a lot of education to do in those fronts. And coming here and not acknowledging it is the first step that you need to do. And also, one of the biggest things is our children and our families. And I want to also say, underscore climate change. I did not hear anything about the climate crisis, climate change issues. There's a hurricane in the town right now from the remnants from Burrell. How can we dismiss climate crisis? It's real, it's happening. We have heat domes people are dying from. We have wildfires. That has to be one of your top agendas, not just the economy and business to Canada. You have to address the climate crisis. But I want to share my time with Mary TG that talk about the children and family. That's so important, and that's what we're dealing with today.
Thank you, Chief Kofi. Mary TG, Chief Proxy, Tackle Nation. First of all, I just wanted to acknowledge my sister's words, and I just wanted to reference your saying that Harper apologized. We endured the worst 10 years ever under the Harper Conservative government. An apology without actions, an apology without money to back it and to make fundamental change are just hollow words in the wind. And we want to ensure that what we endured under the Harper regime, we won't go through that with you. So what assurances can you give us? I want to also ensure that under the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, it was a hard-fought battle that we won, and it proved Canada discriminated against First Nations children. I want to ensure that you are going to honor any of the final settlement agreements that we have come to ensure that there is discrimination has in fact truly ended and will never happen again. So I would like to understand how you're going to do that to make us a clear plan and to ensure that the resources, the billions of dollars that we fought for is going to be protected. And again, I must say that I haven't heard anything that talks about our social agenda. We talked about economic development. I just want you to know that the way that we are right now in TACLA is that our children, our people, our lands will not be commodified, and that we are the true, to understand what inherent right means. I am hereditary chief. I am the Section 35 rights holder. So I think you need to really, again, educate yourself for that. And again, to have a really clear plan to ensure how's your government going to ensure that no longer will our women ever go missing and go murdered again. So we need to hear clear plans. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much for that. A lot of different issues you raised. On the issue of the climate, our belief is the best way to tackle the issue of climate change is through technology and not taxes. Taxes are not working. They are impoverishing our people. They are making it more expensive for people, particularly who live in rural and remote communities. We need to unleash the production of clean, emissions-free energy. That includes nuclear, hydroelectric, and other forms, but to do that we need to speed up the approval process to get these things built. That will bring down costs but also bring down emissions. On the issue of discrimination, our party has been clear when it comes to children's services. Our party has been clear that we support Jordan's principle and that we will give equal treatment and we will support a redress of past injustices and discrimination in child services. You know, we will continue to work with you to resolve the other outstanding issues that you raised. And we believe that economic reconciliation is part of social progress. We need jobs and opportunity for First Nations communities that will ultimately give people a chance to escape poverty and to provide resources for clean water, for education, for health, and for other basic necessities. Both of those things have to go hand in hand. Social support requires economic reconciliation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So last speaker, so the last 4 minutes, you make it the time you want to, if you want to share your time, but over to microphone number 2, please.
Morning. My name is Sheldon Sunshine. I'm the Chief of Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation and what is now known as Alberta Treaty Territory. I applaud the questions that came up this morning. Those were what I was going to cover. But when we're talking about treaty and partnership, I want to understand how are you going to implement that? We have been good treaty partners in Treaty 8. We allowed the colonizations of our lands, and yet we are sitting in probably the poorest nations in this country. And how are we going to address that? I think if you were able to come and speak to all the chiefs in Treaty 1 through 11 to talk about the historic treaties and how that path forward is going to be done. And all of our issues that we got poverty, we got drugs, all of it, everything included, is all tied to our treaty. You know, uphold the treaty obligations that the Crown promised to each of our nations when we signed treaty. And I think that'll be a big step towards reconciliation. You know, I heard that the government of Canada is prosperous, that Alberta is having billions. Last year there was $30 billion in tax royalty revenue, several billion going to Canada, yet we got people living on the streets, as we heard chiefs here yesterday. I have people living on the streets in poverty. So I think having those conversations, meaningful dialogue with your government should you get in, and I'll leave it at that. I would like an answer to that. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. So we'll go with Grand Chief Cody Daibo, host nation. Thank you.
So first off, I'm going to start off with a statement, in case you're not aware. Today is July 11th. This is the anniversary of the 1990 Oka crisis, where we know what happened, where your government marched troops into your allies' lands. There still has never been an apology about that or any movement going forward. So if your government is committed to repairing the relationships with First Nations, then I would ask you to start using the White-Montour decision rather than the Sparrow and Vanderpeet test, which keeps First Nations people frozen in time. We're not some ancient piece of history. We can advance as well together. So those things need to start happening if we want true reconciliation, where we can start taking a hold of our own fate rather than putting it in the hands of the Superior Court or Supreme Court of Canada. So just wanted to say that.
Miigwech, Grand Chief. Over for the conclusion, final remarks, Monsieur Poilievre.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And that is exactly the partnership that I propose, to put you back in control of your decisions and your destiny. I agree with you that there has been a paternalistic top-down relationship, an Ottawa knows best approach that has held back your communities and prevented you from passing on your traditions and your knowledge, your language, and your prosperity to your people. And that needs to change. We need to have a real partnership based on a nation-to-nation relationship and mutual respect. We won't agree on 100% of issues, but we will work together in a respectful way, and the promises that I make will be realistic ones that will actually be fulfilled. I restate what I said in my remarks, that I respect and will uphold the treaties and Section 35 rights, and this will be the foundation of a successful relationship that is built upon mutual trust. So I want to thank all of you for your candor, your direct approach, and for continuing to educate me and all federal representatives on how we can go forward in a true partnership to the benefit of all of our people. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Pierre Poilievre, pour le chef du Parti conservateur du Canada. Merci. Thank you for your time. Thank you, chiefs and proxies that had time to come to the microphone.
Thank you.
I'm sure. I'm sorry, we need to be recognized first at the microphone, and we have our guests waiting, already waiting since 15 minutes now. Thank you, chiefs. Thank you very much. Merci, Monsieur Pierre Poilievre. On that, I will now turn the floor over to my colleague for the next topic on the agenda for our next guest. Thank you so much, everyone.